Welcome. We'd like to call to order the Novi Board of Education regular meeting of November 14th. Would you please rise for the national anthem, or the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Cook, before we start, I just want to let my fellow board members know that a lot of these mics are off right now, so if you're going to be speaking, make sure that you're on.
Thank you.
Double check, please. Okay. This brings us to the third item, approval of the agenda. Motion? Mrs. Beaudoin.
I move that we present the agenda as, I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second. Moved by Mrs. Beaudoin, seconded by Mr. Mitcher. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes 7-0. This brings us to our student board representative report. Cameron, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Mr. Cook. Thank you for asking, actually.
Thank you for being here.
Of course. I usually have like a little bit more time to process, but I'm ready. So, a lot's actually happened in the last month since I've been here. Kind of a lot has happened in the last month. So first off, I wanted to start with fall break. I know this year was like the first year we actually had a fall break. Typically we start in September right after Labor Day, but this year we actually started a week earlier to make room for something like this. And it was a very big hit with the students. Students have loved it all around. It was nice having, as a student myself, it was nice having Friday off and then that Monday and then Election Day Tuesday. So it was a really nice stretch of time. And so fall break, please do it again. And moving on to my next thing, I had winter sports. Many teams had tryouts this week actually, so I know basketball is all finished, and swim we're a bit later. We're like in the next 2 weeks, but most teams had tryouts this week, and so I know a lot of people are happy with. Well, okay, some of them are happy with where they are at. So that went really well. Boys hockey, obviously they started a little bit earlier than everybody else. They had their first game last night, and that went really well. They beat Bloomfield Hills, I believe. And I don't remember what the score was.
7-0.
8-0.
7-0?
8-0.
That's the last goal.
8-0. Wow. Okay, I wish I was there now. And after that, I have girls swim and dive conferences. They have, I believe the divers are diving this week, and then actually right now, I believe. And girls swim had their conferences last week, which I was actually able to attend during advisory, which was really cool. They all swam really well. They were able to beat some of the teams that they didn't even actually beat in the dual meets at conferences, which was a big win for Novi. And on the topic of athletics, we also had our signing day yesterday at Novi High School, and many students, 5 students signed actually. We had Izzy Vargas for soccer, Izzy Early for volleyball, Sophia Gambari for field hockey, Uli Fernsler for baseball, and Karina for rowing actually. And so that went really smoothly. I've never been to a signing day, and I actually got to experience that firsthand. It was a very wholesome experience. So moving on, we had all 14 soloists that performed at the festival received D1 ratings for Novi, and that was very great. And on my last topic, I wanted to touch on the Washington, D.C. trip. I know the 8th graders all went on that. I believe it was either last weekend, maybe the weekend before, and went very smoothly. A few of them I got to actually talk to. There's something different that they hadn't gotten the chance to do before, and that was very cool. They learned a lot about our history, and it was also just a fun experience with their friends. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Cameron.
Of course.
Anybody have any questions for him? Are you ready for swim season?
Absolutely not. I'm excited to go, of course, because it's my senior year and whatnot. I've been working at this, but 5:30 in the morning practices are not fun. So.
I like that you have a nameplate now.
Me too. I was actually going to thank
official.
you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Okay, this brings us to our next section, reports to the board. Mr. Micah.
Thank you. Tonight we are going to talk about our Fall I Ready report, but also we're going to talk about a really important system in our district, and we wanted to give you as a board and also for the public a little bit better understanding. When a lot of times educators throw acronyms around, it can be difficult to understand. We have a process called MTSS, which stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. And Mr. Jeremini is going to take us through that system as he's prepared a report for us this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Micah. Sheila, can you help me with the presentation on the screen? Please.
Oh, sorry. There you go.
Thank you. Figured it would be a little boring if I was just talking and there was literally no visual aid. So thanks for the opportunity to talk to you about this. As Mr. Micah mentioned, I really want to focus on the MTSS process model. Our fall iReady data is not as interesting from a growth perspective as our winter and spring data because we don't have that growth information yet, right? We don't do comparisons last year to this year, generally speaking, like spring to fall. So really what the fall iReady data does for us is helps us set goals, right? Really pay attention to what it is that kids might need and target those individualized goals and work through our processes to make sure students' needs are met. So the data is in the slide deck for you, and that was shared with you in the board packet was shared last week. So today I'm going to really focus on the process itself and some of the new pieces that we've put in place. So the first big step that we do 3 times a year is our data meeting. Data meetings are really the opportunity to dig into the diagnostic data and then attach that to other kinds of data. So all of the slides that you're seeing tonight up on the screen are not Novi data. They are generalized data so that we wouldn't be violating any privacy. And so it's just an illustration so that we sort of understand the process. So the data meeting begins, and those are facilitated by our principals at the K-4 level, by looking at overall placements by grade level, by school. So this is really just a chance to get a sense of where our kids landed this fall. Where are they starting? The green, the dark green, light green, yellow, red, and dark red are the same colors and indicators that you're used to seeing. On or above, just early grade level, and then we start to go 1, 2, and 3 grade levels below after that. So this is just an example. So we start here just to get a sense of where our school is. That's how the principal starts the meeting. And then we dig in and start to look at placement by grade per school by the teacher. So we add that layer. So these meetings are conducted in grade level teams. So you might have your first grade team sitting around a table in a shared visual of the data with their principal. And they're looking at this together and just trying to understand where do we fall. And we see that sometimes, you know, individual first grade classes are not evenly distributed across all teachers, right? So one teacher might have some more students in the yellow, as they say, or more students in the green. It just gives them a sense of understanding about where their grade level falls. We then move on to looking at the domain by teacher. So what really starts to get interesting for us is how are students performing in the areas that we know are important to track when it comes to students learning to read. So how are students demonstrating skills with regard to phonological awareness or phonics or comprehension? And iReady does make an attempt to assess all of those areas to the best of its ability and provide some feedback. And so really having an understanding of where your class is will help you to make some intentional instructional decisions, both in the large Tier 1 experience, like all the students all together, and then in their Tier 2 experience, where we're starting to do some targeted supports. I keep looking at my laptop, but it's changing up there. And then we get to dig into students by domain by teacher. So then, at first it was class level, now it's the individual students. So again, these are fictitious students in order to protect data privacy. But we can see where students are landing. So a student overall might be placed late first grade, but you can see that there is variation across each of the domains. A student might be placed early first grade. The fictitious students sing at the bottom, but you can see that in the area of comprehension, that seems to be where that student is struggling relative to the other domains. And so that starts to make us think about what might this student need versus the student at the very top of that list. They have very different needs when it comes to the supports that we might provide, and this helps our teachers target those efforts. We then take it a step further. iReady groups the students based on their common areas of strength and their common areas of struggle. So you'll see across the top of that 5 different groupings. And iReady automatically does that. In this case, it's based on phonics. So it's grouping the students here by phonics. Teachers at an individual level, as teachers, can see their classes broken up across the 5 different groups, but we can also look across the whole grade level if we want to generate the report that way. So when you have 4 first grade sections in a building, teachers now understand how students might be grouped across sections when we go to provide that win time support, the what I need time support, so that they can actually make the sharing of expertise in that instructional model more efficient, right? So if we group our students based on their needs, and I take the students who are struggling with a particular area of phonics, and you take the students who are struggling with vocabulary perhaps, we separate those and then we get essentially more bang for our buck, right? We're able to address those needs in a more efficient manner. Taking it a step further, within those groupings you can also see their domain-specific placement, so you get a lot of detail. Even further, iReady explains how it grouped those groupings, how it put those students together. So, for example, in the fictitious example, it says that students in this grouping are experiencing difficulty reading words accurately. In order to read for meaning, these students will need to become efficient decoders, and explicit phonics instruction should be the immediate priority for their small group work. The tool is actually providing guidance. It does not mean that this is the end-all, be-all, only thing that our teachers consider, but it is guidance to help them think about how they might approach supporting this student. Then in the box labeled 5, it's actually providing some specific instructional techniques that teachers might consider using with those individual students or those small groups. And then in the box labeled 6, it's providing links to those resources. Now, our teachers don't just use iReady to make instructional decisions. It's one data point, it's one piece of information, but it's a really good starting point so that our teachers are equipped to meet those kids' needs through a variety of means. So that's the first part of our process, data meeting. Again, those occur 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring, and it's really to dig into the diagnostic data. As we set our goals, one of the things that we're focusing on this year is really striving to achieve stretch growth. I know that's a term we're all familiar with. Stretch growth for all of our students, particularly those in historically underserved populations. So then the transition becomes MTSS meetings. So we have a pretty straightforward protocol for that meeting. Everybody introduces themselves. We identify the student that we are focusing on. We analyze their data and hypothesize as to what might be going on that is causing that student to struggle. We then as a team strategize and try to figure out what things we may offer, what interventions can we provide during win time so that that student can be more successful. We prioritize and plan those decided strategies, and then we close the meeting. So these occur monthly on a cycle to help teachers build their plans to support kids, evaluate those plans, and determine if students need even additional support beyond that. So these occur monthly, as I said, and they are facilitated by our interventionists at the buildings. We also added this year something that we call consultation meetings. These also occur monthly as teachers develop these plans of action to support individual students. They might need some feedback, right? Phone a friend, ask for guidance, talk to an expert in the subject area, just get another set of eyes, ears, and a brain on it to help you think it through. So once a month we hold district-wide virtual consultation meetings where all of our experts are available to support teachers. If I have a challenge with a student that is related to behavior, our student success coaches are on that call and then can step in and support your development of a plan to support that individual student. If it's related to reading, our reading interventionists are there. So the teams are there in order to provide teachers the support they need to make this happen. One of the things that we were experiencing when we first arrived and we were looking at the MTSS model is that teachers needed capacity building and support in order to implement the model effectively. It's a research-based model. It will work. We just have to make sure that we can implement it with fidelity, and adding these consultation meetings is one step to actually help support our teachers effectively implement the MTSS process. And then this is just a graphic to sort of highlight the cyclical nature. I know that we've all used different kinds of cyclical improvement processes. We're really analyzing, designing a plan, implementing that plan, and then monitoring that plan to see how it works. We don't just assume because something wasn't successful in the first week that the plan is not going to work for this student. We have to give things time to work and give things time to show us what else we might need to provide that student. And that is really a team effort. Jump back to that slide if I can successfully. So iReady is an adaptive test, and it's really paying attention to what's happening as you're implementing it, as students are taking it. So first, it's adapting to their performance. If they're doing well, the questions get progressively more difficult, or it may move to a more sophisticated domain. If students are not answering questions correctly, it continues to ask questions in that area to see their level. What happens sometimes is students will click through a test and try to get it done, thinking that they can then go to the next thing in their day. So a yellow flag is a possible rush. So then we need to dig a little bit deeper and see if that student did indeed rush while taking the assessment. A red flag is a definite rush. So we need to not consider that score valid and actually ask the student to retake the assessment.
So that would reflect the most recent time they were in there?
Yep.
What they were doing, okay. And then I was also wondering, for the consultation meetings, how do you determine who gets that, or is it more like open office hours with our specialists for teachers that want to take advantage?
It's open office hours. So our specialists, they sign up, they take turns signing up which buildings specialists will be supporting the district that day. And that's again once a month. And they're on Zoom the entire day. And teachers can join during their planning period before school or after school.
And then my last question, maybe the trickiest one. So with this tying into our goal for, our focus area for innovative academics, goal 3, where we're using MTS data to kind of have better positive student outcomes. How does the MTS system tie into those structures during the school day, like what I need time, the win time in K through 4, the academic 60 in Meadows, and what is it in high school? Do you guys have academic time? Is it A?
Advisory.
Advisory. How does the MTS system, especially with like tier level 2 and 3 instruction, how do we connect those to those specific periods in the day?
Sure.
Or what's the intention? It may not be working that way, but what's your vision for that?
Yep. So just to highlight, this is really focused on K4 at the moment. We are researching the 512 system that we want to implement, and that will be for next year. So a lot of what I've talked about is the system that we're trying this year for K4 to kind of bolster things up. So in win time, that is the time that is focused on tier 2 instruction and tier 3 opportunities for students to be pulled to work with an interventionist, to work with an ELD provider, to work with a special education provider. The idea behind WIN is that we don't do any new instruction that those students who are being pulled for extra support might miss. We also can use WIN to provide enrichment. So tier 2 could actually mean enrichment opportunities as opposed to intervention opportunities. So that structure is preserved for that. So teachers are designing tier 2 plans that speak to, I'm going to use these instructional strategies with these materials with this student at this frequency and duration. So it might be 3 days a week for 20 minutes, and I'm going to track that over a period of 6 weeks to see how the student grows. So they're using that time there. There are always challenges. Students might need more than one service, so that is a widespread challenge in the implementation of MTSS nationwide. Students might need reading and math, or behavior and math, like some sort of combination, and that becomes challenging to do all within that win time block. And so what we try to do is remind ourselves that every minute matters, and there are opportunities throughout the school day where you might be able to provide that sort of tier 2 support when students shift to like small group instructional models, right? So like if I'm in my math block and now students are transitioning to work on something and to practice, I might be able to work with a couple of students on a focused targeted skill during that time when I couldn't access them during the win time because perhaps they were pulled for English language development.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. And you're still trying to build what happens 5 through 12?
Correct.
How that
Now,
works?
there are MTSS things happening in 5 through 12 currently. We just have not attended to revising that system in the same way that we did with K4. The implementation of the literacy programs really provided us an opportunity to kind of tie these things together as we introduced new assessments, a more structured framework, so that the teachers had a logical connection between what was happening in the classroom in Tier 1 and then those Tier 2 and Tier 3 opportunities for support. Previously, they were not necessarily linked, particularly in reading, the way that we would hope that they would be.
That makes sense.
But we would use A60, A20, and other opportunities for those those pull-out supports.
And then my last question do you have, I know when we had talked in the past, you had a definitive rough goal for how long a student might need to be in Tier 3 in order, because the goal is not to keep them indefinitely there, it's to get them back to mainstream, a mainstream level. Do you have a goal for what you're targeting students to be in there at? Has it shifted from what you had talked about previously, or?
Not this year. This year is our implement and learn and monitor year. So we're trying to get a sense of, we know that students should be in these cycles for 6 to 8 weeks for academic intervention. And so we're really sticking to the process. One of the challenges you have when a student is in Tier 3, if you do not have strong Tier 2 supports, due to system resources, curricular resources, capacity, whatever the reason might be, a student may leave Tier 3, having demonstrated the necessary growth, fall back to Tier 2 or Tier 1, and if those aren't strong, all of a sudden they're right back in Tier 3 immediately. And that's not what we want to see. And so we're really working hard this year to stick to the process. It is hard to stick to the process and know that the process works. When, a school day moves quickly, like you feel like today it didn't work for this kiddo, we have to scrap everything and start over. That is not the way to go. We've designed a thoughtful plan with lots of expert input. We're going to implement and execute that plan and then monitor the student's growth or lack of growth and then respond. So we may actually keep a student in Tier 3 if they're making progress but not sufficient progress, right? And so it's really individualized to the individual kid. Does that help?
It does, thank you.
Any other questions?
This
Mrs.
isn't so
Baudouin.
much a question, but as a parent, this is something I didn't fully understand, and so I just, for clarification for anyone watching at home, and correct me if this is not right, but our Tier 1 is your main teacher's classroom instruction that goes out to all the students simultaneously. Tier 2 is going to be more when they do small group activities that are going to be more focused on what that child needs to individually learn, or that group of children. And then Tier 3 is outside of the classroom intervention and things of that variety.
That's a great explanation.
Okay, I like to try to translate, because sometimes you all talk a bit high up there.
That's why we need you.
Well, it's taken me a minute to get the full grasp here. And this program is separate from special education.
Correct.
Although they do
MTSS
occasionally
is a general
overlap, but
education
it's
process.
a gen ed program. So
Yeah.
just for anyone wondering at home what we are talking about, that is the short version. That is all for me. Thank you, Mr. Cook.
Any other questions? I have one. When the student's identified as being a Tier 2 or Tier 3, do we notify the parents and involve the parents in any additional services that they might be able to help with, or?
So typically, we will be communicating with parents and offering them additional supports so all of our resources, all of our curricular resources have at-home supplements. And so we may create an at-home reading plan. We may create those math home connections that we use in the everyday math program. We may send those home. There will be specific communication about what the kid is working on, what the teacher is working on with the kid, so that they can be successful and how parents might support.
Are the parents involved in the MTSS meetings or the consult?
Typically, no. When we get to like Tier 3 or something more advanced, we might involve parents in the actual conversations. But parents are always welcome as problem solvers in the process. It's just our structure for designing the plans really tends to be educational expert centered.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
There are no other questions?
I'm sorry, I have a follow-up now from what you said. So when you say we don't involve parents on like Tier 2, that's my understanding is that that's because that's something like, I noticed your child's having a difficult time reading blends, and so we're practicing that in class.
Yep.
So that's not usually a thing where parents need to be informed or involved, because
Correct.
that's already like an expected course of the day. But if they're leaving for an interventionist to meet with like a reading specialist or a math specialist, that's something normally that there's
Yes.
paperwork that goes home for those activities. Correct? Okay.
Yeah, so MTSS really formalizes things that we used to do as teachers before we had a structured process and dedicated time for it, right? We're recognizing a need, we're trying to reteach, we're focusing a little bit more, and it's just formalizing that so it's more intentional and targeted.
Very good, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, okay, let's move on. This brings us to comments from the audience. Do we have any? We have one green card.
One green card tonight, Sue Collins.
Oh, and there's another person that would like to speak as well.
Good evening. I'm Sue Collins Schroeder, a Novi parent, but most of you know me more as the executive director for the Novi Educational Foundation. For those of you who don't know, the Novi Educational Foundation is an organization that we strive to make sure that every single Novi student has an educational experience that is enriched in any way possible. We do that through various things. We do scholarships. We have a needs-based scholarship for seniors. We also have scholarships for the Washington, D.C. trip. So if there is a family out there who is struggling a little bit and may not be able to afford that trip, we want to make sure that every student that wants to go has that opportunity. We also work on district programming. For instance, this year we're involved with the Positivity Project. We've done therapy dogs in the past. I don't know, the list goes on. I'm trying to do this off the top of my head. I apologize. But the biggest thing that we do throughout the year is our classroom grants. And we're really excited because that's coming up soon. And this is kind of the awkward part because I'm going to thank you before you officially accept the donations. But we really appreciate the Board of Education and the administration here in Novi for your support for all of the programs that we do, specifically tonight for our classroom grants. We definitely could not do this without you. Our teachers are amazing. This year we had 56 grant requests, totaling $60,000. Unfortunately, we don't have that kind of money. I wish we did because they were all amazing, but we are approving $36,000 worth of grants, hoping that you accept them this evening. We are going to talk specifically about what they are tonight because we like to surprise the teachers and let them know that they have been awarded their grant. But you will be welcome to join us during those presentations if you would like, as well as throughout the year we do visit the classrooms to see the grants in action, which is some of my favorite time of the year. So please join us for that. And if you're ever interested, the way that we raise the money to fund these classroom grants, we do have different fundraising opportunities. We just did the baseline blitz with our friends in Northville. Thank you so much for your support in that too. We were just a little bit short of beating them, but next year we've got it. We also have our spring event. It's going to be March 8th at Suburban Show Place. More details to follow. So thank you so much for your support. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We have one more. I need to have better eyes, or
You just want
would you
to
like
come
to
up
just
and
come
introduce
up and
yourself?
introduce yourself? Because I cannot, I don't want to butcher your name. Thank you.
Hi everyone. This is Soundarya Alva from Special Education Department from Orchard Hills. So I just had an all the meeting committee. I mean, like all the data that Mr. Sir he's talking about. I just would like to add something on it. So if you work on the teachers, like some teachers are frequently changing, so that is very impactful for the kids. I don't know about the general ed, but for the special education, what I am now, so I could say if we focus about the teachers who are in there for a longer time, they'll have a emotional bonding with that particular teacher where they can work towards greater efficiency. So I say like some support for the teacher initially to cope up with different strategies that MTSS is going to come up with. So I would like retain that teacher, which like filter out which class is doing good and which teacher is doing good as well. The outcomes could determine that, and as well as where to filter out the kids are not doing good, like into some specific areas. So generalize that and make sure that targeted students can be get into a special attention to that, so that you can work it and altogether get a greater efficiency into the outcomes. That's what I would like to add on it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else want to address the board? Oh, you're here. Seeing none, we will move on. This brings us to our consent agenda. On our consent agenda, we have the minutes for the regular board meeting of October 17th. We have the minutes of the finance. We don't have the minutes for the finance committee of the whole.
No.
We have the approval of bills, September board report, September check registry, September purchase card report. We have field trips for the varsity hockey team competition and middle school first championship robotics. We get a motion for consent items. Mr. Mena.
Yeah, I move that the board approve consent items as presented.
Support.
Moved by Mr. Mena, supported by Mrs. Roney. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 7-0. Thank you. This brings us to our donations. Mr. Meinka.
Yes, the district athletic department is in receipt of a generous anonymous donation in the amount of $5,500. The anonymous donor is asking that these funds be used for the Novi High School wrestling team. It is there for your consideration this evening.
We have a motion. Mrs. Roney.
That the Novi Community School Board of Education accept a generous donation in the total amount of $5,500 as presented with appreciation and thanks. Support.
Moved by Mrs. Roney, supported by Dr. Ruskin. Any comments, questions? Whoever you are, appreciate, the school appreciates the donation. We can't do a lot of things we do without the donations from a lot of these people, so we really are thankful for it. So with that, I will call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 7-0. Mr. Mike, I think there's another one.
Next, we have the Educational Foundation. The Novi Educational Foundation Grant Committee met and we reviewed the teacher grants that have been submitted. There are more than are listed here, but as was shared by Ms. Collins Schroeder, we are going to keep those names anonymous until the big reveal, which is coming up soon. These are the grants that total over $1,000 for each of them. And the total of these particular grants total $21,463, and the recommendation is that the board accept this with appreciation and thanks.
Thank you. Can I have a motion, Mr. Mitchner?
I move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education accept the generous donation in the total amount of $21,463 as presented with appreciation and thanks.
Support.
Moved by Mr. Mitchner, supported by Mrs. Beaudoin. Any questions or comments? Again, thank you very much. We really appreciate this. And looking through some of these titles, I was going to ask, for an explanation on some, but we won't do that for tonight. I'll save that for another time. But because it looks like we have some very innovative ways of delivering the message in some of these grant titles. So we appreciate it and thank you very much. So, Mrs. Beaudoin.
Would it be possible for this to be on next month's agenda to just review and announce what these were? That might be kind of lovely for people to hear what then we have to? is
Yeah,
that
we
the
can.
thing?
We're gonna go,
you're gonna
there
do
will
your-
be an announcement, to each of them over the course of the next couple of weeks, I think you've got scheduled. Is that correct? Yeah. So, but we could bring it back and
I would love to hear a little more about it and see what kind of stuff you all are up to.
As long as they're all announced, it shouldn't be an issue,
They'll
right?
be announced before the next board.
Which is,
I'd be interested in hearing that if it's something
Sure.
the rest of you would like to do as well. Thank
Mr.
you.
Mr. Mishner.
Yeah, I just want to say I really appreciate the Novi Educational Foundation and the partnership that the district has with that organization. And they really enable us to kind of supercharge what we're doing here for our students. So really appreciate all that your team does.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 7-0. Thank you very much. This brings us to our action items. Personnel report A.
All
Ms.
right,
Micah.
we'll turn this report over to Dr. Carino.
Thank you. This evening, we present Caitlin Becker for the high school special education resource room teacher position. Caitlin previously served as a high school special education teacher in the Dearborn Public School District. We also recommend Sean Brossi for the middle school PE and computers teacher position. Sean comes to us with previous experience as a physical education teacher in both Farmington and Southfield. We also recommend Tabitha Manuel for the middle school literacy interventionist position. Tabitha has previously worked as an ELA teacher in Southfield, Detroit Public Schools, and Oak Park. Dr. Tara Shamey is being recommended as our new district MTSS coach. Dr. Shamey has extensive experience as a senior director in school improvement, has been a director in Wayne Westland in curriculum instruction and assessment, and has served as a curriculum coordinator in Farmington Public Schools. Tonight, we also recommend Sandaria Alwa as a self-contained special education paraprofessional in Orchard Hills. Sandaria has previously worked as a data analyst in India and as a graduate student assistant at Wayne State. We also recommend Davon Harrison for a bus driver position. Davon has previously worked in the Department of Public Works in Maryland as an equipment operator and supervisor. Dana Chevet is being recommended for a position change from a bus driver to a fleet technician. Dana has many years of experience as an engineering and measurements technician at GM. We also have a few resignations and retirements. Andrew Combe has resigned as the Director of Curriculum and Assessment. Katie Kodnowski has resigned from her music teacher position at Village Oaks. Andrew Pola has resigned from his high school science teacher position. And Tony Scagnetti will be retiring from his third grade teaching position at Novi Woods on December 20th. We wish Tony well and thank him for his years of service. Additionally, Kruti Goswami has chosen to resign from her self-contained special education paraprofessional position at Novi Meadows. Casey Shaheen was discharged from her paraprofessional position at Village Oaks. And Colleen Warren, middle school special education paraprofessional, has opted to retire at the conclusion of the school year. We wish Colleen well in the next chapter and thank her for her service in NCSD. Finally, Michael Turner has resigned from his bus driver position, and this concludes this evening's personnel report.
Thank you. Can I get a motion? Mrs. Roney.
That the Novi Community School District Board of Ed adopts the personnel report recommendations as presented.
Moved by Mrs. Roney, supported by Dr. Ruskin. Do we have any questions, comments? Mr. Commissioner.
Is, Dr. Carino, is this our first MTS-specific position hired?
So we had a person who was a 504 coordinator and / MTSS coach, and so we divided to split those positions into two.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mrs. Beaudoin.
I would just like to thank Mr. Count for all of his work here and say that we all wish him well in his future endeavors. I always enjoyed the way he presented things to us and found him to be very thorough, and I feel like he did a great job for us, so just want to say thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Cameron, you don't have to sit here all night long. If you have homework or something like that, you could do, or,
No, I actually
because
like.
you
want-
did say you have to get up at 5:30 for practice.
Oh, that's in 2 weeks. No, I actually. No, I actually haven't ever stayed for one of these, and I like want to check it off my bucket list. So it's like kind of cool.
I'm sorry, we're not terribly interesting tonight, though.
No, but it's okay. I was actually gonna second what you said about Mr. Combe. I actually got to not work with him, obviously, but see him at the high school, and he was a really cool dude. So
Thank you for that.
of course.
Yes, you can introduce
Okay,
people.
we have two of our new hires this evening, so I would like to welcome Tabitha Manuel to the podium.
Good evening, I'm Tabitha Manuel. I am the new literacy interventionist at Novi Middle School. I'm very excited to be here and to join your district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And last but not least, Sandaria Alba.
Like the fact that she worked on
Hi, good evening, everyone. This is Soundarya Alva. Yeah, once again, like I'm a paraprofessional from Orchard Hills, and I would like to, work with special kids during their hard time. So I just wanted to serve them wholeheartedly. That's where I'm here. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you, thank you, and welcome. Okay, thank you very much. This brings us to the emergency virtual days approval. Mr. Micah.
Thank you. Yes, we've talked about this particular plan. This is something that is going to need to receive annual approval under the new Pupil Accounting Manual. We did present about it last month, but I do want to just highlight that in the new Pupil Accounting Manual through the Michigan Department of Education, school districts can hold up to 15 emergency virtual days. We certainly don't believe that that is the best course of action in most cases, but there are times where we need to hold emergency virtual days for, it could be a power outage, it could be a situation where we have a group of students that are testing and other groups of students are not testing. And so those types of situations do arise. I think Trustee Bodwine brought up at the last meeting, this is not a substitute for snow days, but I do think it's important to just acknowledge this particular resolution as it's crafted in our plan, limits the days to 4. Should additional days be needed, then that would have to come back to the board for a separate request. We do have some plans to utilize 2 days this year as we think about our testing schedule for the high school, which is pretty standard when we do SAT testing in the springtime. But also, we're going to be trying something that I'm very excited about this year, where we're able to work with our ELD students in a way that allows them to not miss up to potentially 7 weeks of lost instruction by being able to get them tested in 1 day with our staff. And so we've talked about that. And it's a really good opportunity to meet their needs in ways that haven't been met before. And it actually results in less lost class time and disruptions because of the less frequency of having to pull them out of instruction time to do those things. So we're excited about that. And so this plan as presented tonight and we've discussed in the past is something that we'll have to revisit each year on an annual basis.
Thank you. Can I get a motion? Mr. Michener.
I move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education approve the emergency virtual days plan as presented.
Support.
Moved by Mr. Michener, supported by Mr. Mena. Do we have any questions, comments on this? Pretty well explained and repeat item, so. Seeing none, we will call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 7-0. Thank you very much. This brings us to our maintenance equipment purchase. Mr. Micah.
Thank you. We've presented this at the last board meeting, but we are in need of 11 separate pieces of custodial equipment as well as a new scissor lift. These items total cost of $133,220.98. which will be expended from the 2019 bond fund, and that purchase is here for your approval this evening.
Thank you. Can I get a motion? Mrs. Roney.
That the Novi Community School District Board of Education approve the purchase of custodial equipment and the Genie Scissor Lift for a total cost of $133,220.98 to be expended from the 2019 bond fund.
Support.
Moved by Mrs. Roney, supported by Dr. Ruskin. Do we have any questions? No? Seeing we're replacing some of the custodial equipment, Mike, is any of that being misused or abused, or? Because I know we're providing equipment for others, and I know your guys take care of your stuff because it shines better than 3 years later than it did when you first bought it.
These things wear out, and some of them are pieces of equipment we needed to manage the different amount of surfaces that we have at the New Meadows building.
Yep.
Got all that smooth, shiny floor. We need different types of machines for that. So, yeah, we did an upgrade several years ago, but this is just replacing units, that pieces of equipment that have failed, and adding what we need to, have them be successful in cleaning our buildings.
Because you rarely come forward asking for stuff, so.
I can come more if you want. Be back in a few minutes.
That you will. Thank you.
Oh.
So, any other questions? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 7-0. This brings us to our information and discussion session. First one is for Mike again, high school chiller replacement discussion.
Yes,
Mr.
so
Markov.
this is a kind of an interesting thing that came up unexpectedly, and it's sitting right now in information and discussion, although I will say the sooner that this can be approved, the better. But I'm going to just kind of give a little background. The high school chiller is 21 years old, which has exceeded its expected 20-year life expectancy. And to put it in short terms, this is a very big piece of equipment. It's the largest chiller in the entire district, and that provides air conditioning to the entire high school. If you recall, this chiller went down a handful of years ago, not too long ago, and actually it was before my time, but the district actually had to cancel school at the high school because of the heat that had been reached actually in the month of March. And that was because the chiller had needed to be repaired at the time. At this point, the chiller has failed, and so the amount of time we need to be able to install it is the clock is ticking, because in the event that this is not approved, then obviously it would jeopardize our ability to cool the high school come the springtime. So it's a large purchase. The types of purchases like this that are dealing with equipment or maintenance and upkeep largely fall within our sinking fund. This is an allowable expenditure in there, and we certainly have funds like that for these very reasons. So the particular chiller itself is about $490,000, give or take. You're going to have some different components of fees and contingencies there, but the recommended amount for this purchase is $571,889.80. And that is there for your discussion tonight, and as I said before, I'll leave that in your court.
Okay. Mr. Mena.
This was an interesting one because there's probably by now probably over 100 comment thread on this particular issue on nextdoor.com. Evidently, this particular chiller has had this humming sound that I hadn't heard anything about until just a couple days ago. Somebody brought it to my attention about this big Nextdoor thread, so I went through and read it. And it was actually a community member who literally went around, walking around with their husband and a dog, looking for the source of the sound that was coming from some piece of machinery somewhere in the city, and then they were able to pinpoint it to that particular unit. I would certainly, given that it is causing quite a bit of concern from community members, and not thinking of any reason why we would need to delay it, I would certainly support moving this particular issue, actually both issues, we'll talk about the other one later, up for action item today.
Would you like to make a motion?
I will as soon as I find the the dollar amount again, because
$571,899.
oh, yeah, well, here it goes, okay. So I move then, if no concern, that I move that the board approve the high school chiller replacement unit for a total of $571,899.80.
Support.
You want to arm wrestle?
No, you can give it to Dr. Ruskin.
Okay. Moved by Mr. Mena and supported by Dr. Ruskin that we purchase the chiller. Do we have any other questions or comments? Mrs. Baudouin?
How quickly, so assuming we all say, yes, this is a great idea to replace this, how quickly can we have this resolved if we have become a nuisance to our community?
This chiller only runs, or any chiller is only going to run when it's above 52 to 55 degrees outdoors.
Okay.
I think this chiller, if it's approved, is probably run its last cycle unless we get another warm up. So at this point, if it's approved, we'll be able to take it offline. It won't run another cycle ever. And we have a 15-week lead time to get the new chiller built, get it installed. We would have it in place in time for the warm weather, which typically getting above 52 to 55 degrees at the end of March, middle of March, end of March.
So is it currently causing a noise problem?
Last week when it was above.
Oh, because it was just warm again, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic then.
Yep.
So this will, if we are able to pass this, this will then resolve that issue.
Yes.
And Mr. Mena, maybe you could go on next door and just let them all know we
Yeah.
can.
I do have a couple of questions. You had mentioned.
I am.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to know if people were still gonna be upset with us, because I mentioned to somebody else after we had spoken about this chiller, and was informed that yes, it has indeed been quite a problem for some time. And I was like, oh, goodness.
Now, the new chiller will make noise as well. It's a big, gigantic machine. It's like
But hopefully a different noise.
yeah.
Does it, so does it run specifically when it's between a certain temperature range, or is it also time? I mean, is it running at midnight at night?
It's on demand. So we will schedule, if we have events after hours, because I was reading that same thread, why is this thing running at 9 o'clock at night? Well, if we have events in the auditorium or the gymnasium or the cafeteria or any other zone that this thing provides cooling to, it will be on, assuming it's above 52 to 55 outside. If it's below 52 or 55, we're bringing in outdoor air just to do the cooling. If it's above, we're running mechanical cooling whenever the unit is scheduled to run.
Is it, so it almost seems like it's some sort of a harmonic sound issue. So is that adjustable so that we stay out of that range?
It can be. Different things happen on the compressors on the condenser. When it gets near its set point of 44-degree water temperature, it will start to unload. So, and that will change the harmonics. I was told we walked the building last Thursday with King Scott and with Ignite, our mechanical engineers, and they had talked about that specifically with this chiller that we're buying. If they identify an annoying sound, like at 75%, they can program it to just skip over that. So if it's ramping up, it'll go 65, 70, and then it might just jump to 80% to avoid annoying harmonic pitches.
Okay, right, and that's something that our current system can't do.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
That all?
Yep.
Okay, Mr. Commissioner.
So I'm curious, what do you chalk up the differential between the two brands of about $175,000? Is that just branding, or is there a difference in BTU or refrigeration ton output?
They are the same tonnage, 400 ton, which is just shy of 5 million BTUs an hour that it's removing from the interior. Both are very reputable brands. We have both in our district currently. And the one that we're moving forward with is a much cheaper price, has a much shorter lead time. It could be the branding. I'm not positive why there was such a price gap.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mrs. Roney?
How long is the life expectancy?
20
Is it
years.
20 years on
Most
this
mechanical
one?
equipment has a life expectancy of 20 years.
And is this on the roof or on the ground?
It is up on the rooftop above the east boiler room, which is just southwest of the tennis courts.
Okay, thank
And
you.
it's in an enclosure, so that there's a little sound attenuation from the enclosure, but it's right up there on the roof.
Okay. Any other questions?
Sorry.
Cameron, you want to ask a question? Go ahead.
So I'm not sure if we already mentioned it, but how long did you say it take to install?
Well, if it's approved, and we know it's a 15-week build time, they will start prepping. Now, it would be good practice to not do anything to dismantle our existing chiller until we know this thing has been built and it's, very nearby, in case they went on strike or something like that. You just never know. So we would wait till it's nearby. Once we know it's in hand, they would be able to quickly get the piping disconnected, the electrical and the temperature control signals disconnected. A crane will come out, lift the new one on, take the old one off, get everything hooked up. I don't know, I would guesstimate 2 weeks for the actual hookup once it's landed. Good question, though.
Any other questions? My question is, we know we're gonna do some minor construction in that area, and potentially, if we're lucky, we'll do major construction in that area. And is this really we'll be installing it and potentially even moving it? If this happens, is that the wisest thing to do, or should we be looking for a new location now?
Well, all the utilities go back to that corner of the building, and for now, we kind of have to. But we also did walk that space with our mechanical engineers and King Scott to see, because we understand potentially the new indoor activity center may butt right up to that area, and that could be a connecting point. They identified that in their mind, they think that whole room would stay where it is. And just to the south of that, there's a subgrade mechanical room that's all things pool that would be going away because the new place might have a new pool. And they said they could build some type of a passage through there with even like a bridge and a high space and really get cool with it. So we also explored if we did have to move it, that chiller would still be good if we had to move the thing in a few years. I think the cost on the moving it was like $40,000 for disconnecting it, crane rental, and putting it in a new spot. So it's not a big gamble. Chances are this unit will spend its whole life where it's going to be landed.
About 10% of what the unit costs then, yeah.
So cost and repair are about equivalent, cost to move and cost to repair are about equivalent. You mentioned in this that it's about $42,000 to repair?
Yeah, and I also mentioned we have intermittent issues on the other circuit. It has two circuits. One of them is completely failed. The $42,000 repair is simply to repair piping and put refrigerant in it, and I don't think it addresses the problem of the compressor that is shaking this piping loose. So I think proceeding with this ultimately would be our best bet.
Do you foresee with the construction that we might have to do an airlift to get it in and out, or
No.
you'd still be able to reach with the crane?
From any renderings I've seen, they kind of leave that whole area open and accessible. So,
Okay, I just hate doing something once and then having to redo it. just
Absolutely.
Shortly down the road.
absolutely. Yeah, and we've thought of that. Like I said, we had the engineers come over from the west side of the state, and Johnny Davids from King Scott spent the day with us. So we looked at it really deeply. We wanted to make sure this was what we wanted to present.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the table. Anybody have any other additional questions? Seeing
I'm sorry.
Mrs. Bodine.
I don't think this was in the motion, but is this gonna come out of the sinking fund then? Is that what the intent is, or is that, does any specify?
It'll come out of the sinking fund and bond funds, yes.
Okay, do we need to specify that in the motion? or-
Yes, I would say that it's gonna be coming from the sinking fund and 2019 bond funds.
Okay, Mr. Manager, do you wanna make an amendment to that then?
Yep, I will. So I'll make an amended motion, that we approve the the board approve the new high school chiller, for, cost of $571,899.80, with the funds to come from sinking and, what did we say the other one?
2019 bond.
And 2019 bond.
Support.
So we have an amended,
Well, I retracted my
Okay.
motion. Who seconded it?
Mrs.,
I think,
the original one.
yes, the original.
All right, are you okay with that? If I retract it then, and then, so this is a new motion.
So this motion is made by Mr. Mena, supported by Mrs. Beaudoin. And if we have no further questions, we'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 7-0. Thank you, Mike. Or Mr. Dragovich. Okay, this brings us to item B, video board proposal discussion. Mr. Micah.
Alrighty, so after a thorough review and discussion, we've been looking at how to replace the baseball fields. As you know, that was a project that's been well underway. We're actually ahead of schedule out there. The original credit that we had for the scoreboards included an analog board. I asked the team to continue to look into that because at our soccer fields, at our indoor volleyball and basketball complex, as well as our stadium for track and field hockey, lacrosse, and football, we do maintain video boards. And so as we think about our strategic plan, we talk about a common standard across the district. And so I think that, in this particular case, it makes sense as we're building this new field to consider having the same technology across the district. So there was a group of members of our athletic department that had an opportunity to go visit a couple sites that had some of these at baseball and softball stadiums. And so the new price for the boards, the price for both of the boards is just over $270,000. But we would get a credit back from our original scoreboard credit. So that results in a $206,261.60 increase, which is more than capable of being made through contingency. We're mostly through that project, and most of the contingency would have come out of earthwork, which is already done. So the recommendation is there for you for information and discussion. And we'll just highlight that once this is approved, we can start putting the infrastructure in place for steel, which will actually hold the boards. And so obviously the sooner that happens, the easier that becomes. We can install pretty much at any time, even in the middle of the winter, as long as the steel is located and installed. So that's there for your discussion and information tonight.
Thank you. Mrs. Roney.
Would that come out of what fund?
That's gonna come out of the bond fund, and that's gonna come out of the fund, the contingency for that project, because we have used very little, if any, of that at this point.
Okay.
Mr. Mitchell.
Do you know how much of the contingency fund will be left if we do move forward with this?
Yeah, I'll let Mr. Donnelly talk.
Good question. Unfortunately, I don't have that answer at my fingertips, but I can get it for you for sure. I can tell you that that project has gone very well as far as unforeseen conditions, and it's been very minimal in the original contingency we've spent, but certainly as a follow-up, I can give you that number of where we're at. But I can tell you that this expenditure would easily come out of the available contingency.
So like rough ballpark, are we like only 20% into the contingency?
I would say that's
40%, where do you think?
I would say 20 to 25% in, and probably 75% of the way through the project. The biggest risk that you have is coming out of the ground with unforeseen conditions. Everything is pretty much predictable moving forward now, so I feel pretty confident that if anything, we'll probably give some money back at the end of the day.
Thanks.
Mr. Mill.
This was the other one that I was going to ask we move up for action item also, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Donnelly. My understanding is that if we were to approve this now, that we can get the steel, meaning the posts, up for both of those boards in December, and then the board could actually get installed in February when the ground is hard and it's a lot easier to work with the trucks out there versus in March when things start to really soften up.
Yeah, that's correct. If the board so chooses so, we would welcome an approval tonight because it'll allow us to get a jump on the procurement. And to Mr. Mena's point, we would then be able to get the steel up in January and set the boards in February. They do want to track their equipment and materials back there when the ground is frozen. So we do run a risk of having to potentially restore areas if we're doing that in March.
Any other questions, Mr.
Well,
Miller?
if there isn't any objection, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion for approval on this today.
Go ahead, I think that's.
I move that the board approve the video board purchases for both the softball and baseball diamonds at a cost, increased fund project contingency cost of $206,261.60 to come out of the 2019 bond.
No, the contingency fund.
The contingency
The contingency
for
fund.
that project.
Yep.
Okay.
I'll support.
Moved by Mr. Mena, supported by Mrs. Roney. Any other questions or comments? Mrs. Beaudoin?
So when we originally talked about this, the plan was the analog board, but the other sports have digital, and so we wanted to try to mirror what we have with the other sports. Is that?
Yeah, I think that it was a product of when the original project was done, TMP had done the scope and the spec, and they just kind of, when they went through, they just put a standard credit out there for an analog board. They didn't take a look at the fact that all of our other facilities have these types of boards, and so it would be a little bit, in my estimation, a little odd to have, you know, all of the other fields and complexes with this type of a board, and then we'd actually be putting a different board at this one. So the software that runs those, we actually have a student club that's being formed right now with Mr. Tobus, so that more and more kids will have opportunities to be able to code and then run some of the electronics on the board. And so that software is all the same. So it would actually be a totally different type of program at that field if we went with what they originally spec'd. So we typically have looked at the consortium pricing for these boards and done it this way. It was just the way that they had spec'd the project originally. So that was when we had made, that's what the recommendation is to say, let's look at all of them so that we have the same operating system that we're using.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I'm not trying to be difficult at all, but is there like any specific reason this one didn't come to us sooner? Or is this like a more recent change that was made? Because I know like we normally take more time, but if there's a little bit of a time crunch here, I'm happy to move forward quickly with it if that helps you all be able to construct it properly.
Yeah.
I just am curious, like if this, like what prompted this adjustment happening now? I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
Great question. So I guess first what I would say is I really do love and appreciate the philosophy that this board has established, which is let's look at something and then a month later, you know, we would do that. And I think particularly for anything that could be potentially where there might be more questions coming from the community, that makes a lot of sense. I always put them in information and discussion unless it's an absolute emergency. And then I think it's incumbent on if you as a board are okay or wanting to move that forward. We just got the final analysis done on these boards over the last couple weeks, because once the project was underway, that was when it kind of unearthed that we had this situation. So we asked athletics to go out, I think they went out probably 4 weeks ago, and then they came back with this recommendation over the last couple weeks. So the root of your question though is if we wait to approve it, we're totally fine. It's not going to be the end of the world. The benefit of approving it now, which would be absolutely based on the comfort that you would have if you didn't need that month time interval in between, the benefit is that we can install the concrete that the steel goes on now while the ground is allowing for that. And that steel has to be sized based on the specific boards that you buy. And then in the event that, let's say that the boards were built and delivered in February, and the ground was solid and frozen, they could still be installed on the steel because we could get that up earlier. The alternate way would be that we would probably wait until the spring to install the steel and do them all at once, which isn't the end of the world. It may mean that the first game or something like that, but that's probably an acceptable thing. So we're bringing it because this is as soon as we have the information, so.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So basically, during the course of this project, this is the point where we're getting ready to order the other scoreboards. We do have extra money left. It doesn't meet the same quality standards we've set elsewhere, and that's why this is coming to us for this change.
That is exactly
Okay.
correct, yep.
Sounds good. I just wasn't sure like what prompted it happening right now. It sounds
Yep.
like that's just, this is the part of the project where scoreboards get ordered.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly.
Well, I'm glad the project has gone really well so that we are asking, you know, for more money outside of the scope, though. That's wonderful.
Any other questions? I'm glad to see Mr. Tobis is forming a club to do some of these cards. I only do a small portion of them. I know Mr. Mena does the majority of them, but, you know, sitting down and doing 160, 170 roster cards with pictures and names and trying to get spellings correctly, and it can be a load, and so I
Yeah.
appreciate that we're getting students involved in it.
I think it's a unique opportunity for our student athletes to have those experiences, but I think it's yet another educational opportunity for our kids to learn how to understand what goes into the coding, the back-end work, and there's a lot of our students that might be interested in going into that type of a line of work, and so Mr. Latart's class offers some opportunities, but I think this group that Mr. Tobis is working on will give us an opportunity to have kind of a steady flow of students that can kind of help not only design what goes on the boards, but then also facilitate those during the contest. So it's going to be kind of a cool student experience, I think.
I really appreciate that. Sorry to give your job away.
No issue there.
I was fortunate enough last Friday to visit the site with Mr. Minka, and you think a guy pulling up in a van with a couple rolls of carpeting to do your family room is a load. You go back in there and there's probably no less than 30 or 40 rolls of carpeting, and it's a big area that's being turfed out there. And thank goodness we had good weather up to this point, that we were able to at least get I know the softball field was in last week, they were laying that, and hopefully this week the baseball diamond was started, or?
Baseball could potentially start tomorrow, if not Monday, and we're hearing that it should take 2 weeks in totality for the baseball. So we're hoping in 2 weeks we'll have all the turf complete.
You do realize we usually have snow about that time.
I'm controlling that this year, we're good.
As long as you have that under your control, so, okay,
Yeah, we've been fortunate, and it's looking great.
thank you. So, without any further questions, we'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 7-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. This brings us to our committee reports. The first one being the Master Planning Ad Hoc Committee report. I hate to say this, but
That would be you.
it is me, and it kind of slipped my mind, but we had a brief meeting where we talked about putting our educational goals into kind of buckets and what we would do that. And once we get those split up, then we would look at if we needed any facilities or anything in particular to meet those. The goal of the master planning committee, though, is not for the next bond, it's for the bond beyond that. So we're trying to think 10 years out, which most educators know we have no idea what the kids will be doing, you know, when they get out of school at that point. So, but we're trying to get our our arms around it and get a long-term direction for where we want the district what we want the district to look like. It won't be anything set in stone, but it'll be something that can be reviewed often and maybe say, hey, this is a really good idea, we can implement this now, or no, we don't necessarily have the money for that, so let's put it off. But we appreciate the work that Mrs. Baudouin and Dr. Ruskin are doing with us on that. So I guess that will be my report on that one. And the next one would be the Finance Committee of the Whole. Mrs. Roney.
Well, we had the meeting just before this one, and I believe we have a presentation So I will turn it over to Ben, who can turn it over to.
Super excited to have an opportunity to hear our audit report. I will say we heard this at the Finance Committee of the Whole. And Ms. Cicluna certainly echoed this, but a great deal of thanks to Steve LeBlanc and our entire finance team for doing such a great job getting Yo and Yo the information. And we had a really nice audit report, and I believe we're going to hear the highlights right now.
Yep. So good evening, everybody. My name's Jessica Rolfe. I'm a principal with Yo and Yo CPAs and Advisors. We did meet with Finance Committee earlier today and went through the reports in a lot of detail. Tonight, I'm just going to go through a brief overview of what those audit results were and some of the numbers. If we start out, the first thing I'm going to talk about is our audit opinion. So this is what we're actually hired to do, is to give an opinion on your financial statements. We had an unmodified opinion this year. That's the highest level of assurance you can receive, the best opinion you can have. What it means is that the statements are prepared in accordance with the standards that they're supposed to be, and that we feel they're free of any material misstatements. Next up, I'm going to talk about the numbers a little bit. Here we have your balance sheet for your governmental funds. We have your general fund, your major funds, which were the capital projects fund and the debt service funds, and then your non-major funds there, which are things such as your student activities, food service, some of those smaller funds, the rec fund. I'm going to focus on the general fund tonight as your main operational fund. You'll see general fund assets, we're at about 30.6 million this year. Liabilities are about 15.1. Both of those were up from the prior year, mainly due to some state revenue that was higher this year, came in more towards the end of the year, resulting in some unearned revenue in those liabilities, and some cash and investments in the assets, so increasing both of those lines. You'll see there fund balance came out at about $15.5 million. We'll see when we move to this next slide that was an increase in fund balance from the prior year. Here we have your statements of revenues and expenditures. This will show all the revenues and expenditures for the entire fiscal year ending June 30th. You'll see revenues at about $105.2 million, expenditures at about $104.1 million. Again, both of those up this year. Revenues up mostly due to property tax increases, state revenue increases, which kind of all the districts saw, and then a very small increase in your federal revenues as well. When you get more state and federal revenue, it means you usually have more expenses to spend those funds. So that was the increase on the expense side as well. The important line there is that change in fund balance. So that's what you added to your general fund balance this year. You will see you added almost $1.1 million. And we'll talk about that a little more as we move through as well. Here we show the budgetary comparison of what the board originally approved, what that final budget was, and then where actual came in. You will see your final budget was about $159,000. That actual came in for an increase of a little over $1 million, like I just mentioned, so it actually came in better than what you projected. It was a very tough year for budgeting for all the districts because of that state funding kind of coming in towards the end, not knowing what exactly would be spent by the year end. So very comparable with all the other districts I've looked at. You can see there it's still very accurate percentage-wise by each category. We also compared to prior year, just so you can get an idea. Last year, there was a decrease in fund balance of 1.3 million. This year, there was an increase, kind of about almost netted out there. You'll see when we get to the next slide, the district's been trying to keep that fund balance amount at about 15% of expenditures, and that's kind of allowed them to do that. Just to give a little visual representation of where those revenues come from, the bulk of revenue for the district does come from state sources. The other is, the next largest would be your local, which is mostly property taxes, and then that smaller portion of federal and any other revenues. Those percentages were all fairly similar to last year, stayed up a little bit as I mentioned because of more funds this year compared to last. We also broke out the expenditures by major category. You'll see salaries and benefits, definitely the biggest chunk and always the biggest chunk for really any business or organization. If you take those salaries and benefits combined, you were at around 83%, very consistent with all of their districts I see, so right in line there with that percentage as well. This is a slide everybody kind of likes to look at. It's that fund balance as percentage of expenditures. I mentioned the district's been trying to hover around that 15% amount. So even though there was an increase in fund balance this year, we're still very close to where we were last year. Last year we were at 14.87%. This year 14.89. The Michigan Department of Education does recommend about a 15% fund balance, so you guys are right where you should be, according to their recommendations as well. Just to get an idea of your enrollment, this was a little unusual. Usually I see this trend going down, down, down over the years, so it shows a lot towards your teachers, your staff, everything you're doing here in terms of keeping kids in the district. So you can see that line is very straight, which is good. It means your enrollment has been very consistent over the last few years, where many districts have definitely seen that decline. So those are a lot of the numbers. The last thing I'm going to talk about is kind of those results. So we break it into two sections: the financial statements, which are the numbers we just talked about. We had no findings in relation to those financial statements or numbers we just discussed. The federal awards section that's on here is specific to your federal dollars. So we do a separate audit specifically to federal dollars. We select certain programs to test each year based on a formula calculation, the last time we tested them, the size. We actually had 3 major programs this year that we tested. It was the Education Stabilization Fund, which is ESSER, some additional coronavirus funds that came in this year, as well as your special education cluster. Again, we had no issues or findings with any of those programs or any federal dollars. So you can see there's a lot of no's there, which is a good thing. One other piece that the board received would be a governance letter. This is required communication. We talk about any estimates, any journal entries, any recommendations, anything else we think you should know that wasn't in those statements. We always let you know if there's any estimates in your statements. There's a few mentioned there, very standard for the district. Those pension and OPEB liability calculations based on a lot of actuarial data. And then that useful life of fixed asset, how long we think some of those assets are going to last, and we'd appreciate them. We did have a few recommendations with the audit. These are not findings. These are not bad. Typically for a district, we do have recommendations. There's a lot going on. We were also a new auditor this year, so we kind of look at things a little differently and usually come up with some recommendations as well. The first one is something that I've had at every district except one this year, and it really relates back to a lot of the free lunches over the last few years. So MDE requires that your food service fund balance not exceed 3 months of expenditures. You guys are above that amount, as most districts are, because of the free lunches. So just a recommendation there to bring attention to that. Keep finding ways to spend that fund balance down, submitting your plans with the rest of the state. The other 2 there were budget overages and then some capital asset tracking. We discussed that in detail with finance, some small improvements that need to be made there perhaps in the next year. And we will take a look at those next year when we come out for the audit as well and report back on how those items were addressed. Other than that, as they mentioned, the audit went great. For a first-year audit, I think it was one of the best ones I've ever dealt with. They were very ready, very on top of things, got us the information. We didn't have any audit journal entries, which is huge. So overall, definitely big kudos to your team, and I really enjoyed working with them, and hopefully the same. And that's it. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have anything additional to add, or?
No, I'd just like to thank Steve, Becca, and of course Devin for getting this all together and keeping things rolling and, keeping us on track with our finances.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, Steve. I know it's not easy having somebody come in and look through your work. Okay, this brings us to our superintendent report.
Thank you very much. I'd like to echo one of the things Cameron said. Not only our students, but our staff absolutely loved having the fall break this year. I think it was a big hit, an opportunity that we discussed of just really having staff and students spend a little bit of time apart in that first long stretch of the year. And so we're excited to see how that continues in the future. Obviously, a lot of our buildings are smack dab in the middle of conference season. We've been getting through our fall conferences. I've also been visiting the buildings, doing listening tours, and I have my student superintendent advisory team meetings, and those have been really enlightening. I will prepare kind of a summary for the board once I'm concluded with the listening tours. We also had a town hall meeting at Monday evening at the Meadows Cafeteria. I know that many of you were able to make it. I would say that it was a very interesting way to kind of kick off what are the future possibilities for our facilities. Really looking at our high school, and we got a chance to hear from some of our students that are on our student council that participated in that discussion as well. I would like to put it out there that we have another follow-up to that town hall. Town hall number 2 is going to be on December 2nd. Same location, same time. And I would highly encourage members of the community to come out, start giving your input on what might be ideal for our educational facilities moving forward into the future. I also want to let everybody know that we have Thanksgiving break coming up on the 27th, 28th, and 29th, just in a couple short weeks here. So thank you to the board for all your support, and I appreciate all of your energy that you bring to the district. So thank you.
Thank you. This brings us to our administrative reports. And seeing Mr. Jeremini hides in the corner and then walks out when we're talking about very interesting financial things. He goes last.
What I say is I'm watching him on TV, I'm thinking, we need to get some more light on him.
Yeah.
It's kind of shadowy. He's like a half shadowy figure on the TV screen. So
We can start mixing up the seats if you want. No, we can't actually.
No, I'm going to make him go first. Mr. Jeremini.
Oh, I just sat back. I do find finance very interesting. One little addendum to my presentation from earlier I forgot to mention. The teaching and learning team is sitting in on all of these data and MTSS meetings so that we can monitor the process and get feedback and try to make it better. So I really appreciate all of the directors involving themselves in that because it spans every person in our department. Next week, we actually have what we call guided walkthroughs for our new literacy and knowledge building program, Wit and Wisdom. The curriculum company actually provides this support to help our coaches and to help our administrators develop capacity to better support our teachers in the implementation. So they're really going to come in, we're going to have a protocol, they're going to do a little mini training or briefing. And then there's actually 3 days of these walkthroughs, visiting classrooms to check out what's going on and to get a sense of how our implementation is going, because that's what we're really interested in. So I'm really excited about that. Some cabinet members will also be participating along with the principals and coaches, so it should be interesting as we work to better support our teachers doing that really heavy lifting. So thanks.
Thank you. And the bearer of good news tonight, Ms. Cicluna.
Sure. So last month, I think I spoke about the EV vans and they were in transit. I think most of you know that 2 out of the 3 vans were delivered. I don't know if all of you had an opportunity to take a ride in one of them, but we're currently getting proposals to have the vans outfitted with the Novi logo so that it's basically a advertisement on wheels, but more so it's actually going to be very efficient for us to drive small groups of kids around the district to different facilities, and it should really offset some of our transportation costs. So we're really looking forward to getting those wrapped, getting them on the ground and actually moving with kids inside of them. And then also just what I want to share in the spirit of continuous improvement following a stellar financial audit. The team continues to work on the system transition. I think you all know that we moved to SMART over the summer. We still currently have been operating payroll and benefits out of our prior system, Business Plus, and the payroll team has been working specifically this month very hard to get everything on track so that we can fully transition January 1st. So I just want to shout out to the payroll team. They've done a lot, especially with open enrollment happening right now, with the system transition. They're doing a lot to make things work in 2 systems and then ultimately to get us into 1 system moving forward. And then last but not least, I've been touring. I've really kicked off a tour with Kim Sinclair, our Director of Food Service. In the same vein with the audit where, we've got excess funds in this food balance, and how are we going to spend these funds? How are we going to utilize these funds in the wisest manner that best suits the needs of our kids, not only today, but in the future? And so I think the best way to do that is to go into the schools during lunchtime, see how they're how is lunch functioning today, where are the current needs? And I had an opportunity to do that yesterday. I visited the middle school. Kim gave me a tour of the facility during lunch, and I think we're going to go to the high school possibly next week. So more to come there, and I'll be happy to share it with the board, but really looking to utilize the funds in the best manner possible.
Thank you. Now for the bearer of good news when we get to hire people, bad news when they resign or retire. Dr. Carino.
Indeed. Yes, we continue to be busy in hiring and filling some vacancies. So we are close to being completely staffed, so we will continue our progress in that effort. I also attended the district visioning meeting on Monday evening and just really want to praise our high school students who helped facilitate that meeting. They were so incredibly impressive and just were so articulate in their thoughts. So I just want to commend them. It is National School Psychologist Week, and so I just want to recognize our school psychologists for the difference that they make with our students and staff. They are a tremendous asset to our district, and I am grateful for them and just want to publicly recognize them. As Cameron shared, fall break was not only appreciated by students, but also staff. I know many people did not want to come back when it was beautiful weather in August, but I think the timing of this break really came at a great time to be able to give people the strength to push forward to Thanksgiving, and just want to wish all of our staff and students and families a happy Thanksgiving. So, thank you.
Thank you. This brings us to our board communication. Does any board member have something they would like to share, or Mr. Mishner?
Yes, so it's been a lot of events going on, especially at Meadows, but I just want to highlight how some of the things that we do here directly are improving not only the lives of our students, but also our community. For example, the PTO movie night that they have at Meadows is only made possible because we have a video board on the soccer field, and that had great participation. It was beautiful weather, and the students really enjoyed watching. I think it was Inside Out 2 on a giant screen outside. But that's part of like what we approved tonight. I can envision it helps that softball and baseball field to be more multifunctional. So I really appreciate that. Also, just the new Meadows building itself. The PTO has already had Red Ribbon Week and Bingo Night in that new cafeteria space, and it's just so open and so well lit. The events are held at night, but it's a much higher energy space because the lighting seems so natural. The ceilings are so high. So the bingo night was well attended. You can fit more people in, so that I know that the attendance was up on both of those events over prior years when they were held in the cafeteria in the 6th grade house. So just that investment in that building that is mostly for education during school hours is also paying off dividends and improving our community environment and experiences. And also just even how we had the financial committee meeting in the common area in the Meadows building. That was a really nice meeting, and the space is just really fun to be in. So I really think that we're making wise investments in our district resources that have multi-uses for our community. And even the new gym in the Meadows facility, Novi Parks and Recs, uses our elementary school and middle school gyms quite often for practices and games during the weekend for the younger age groups. And to play in that gym is just phenomenal because it's so beautiful. It's brand new. And at all the other elementary schools, if you're a parent watching or even a coach on the sidelines, there's not a lot of space between the wall and where the court starts. And you're trying not to get on the court while the kids are playing. Where you have plenty of space in the Meadows facility, it's more akin to what we have in the middle school. And there's bleachers for the parents to sit in. It just makes for a much better experience for both the players, the coaches, the parents, the staff. So really, it's a nice addition to our district in more ways than just for education. So, I almost forgot. Also, just wanted to put in a plug. Multicultural nights are coming up at Parkview. They have theirs on the 19th. That's this Tuesday, starting at 6:30. And Village Oaks is next that Friday following on the 22nd, starting at 6. So if you're looking for something fun to do with the family, I would encourage you to go to these events. They're open to the community, and they're a really positive, great experience. They're usually well attended, and you might find out you enjoy some kind of food or different culture that you never expected. So,
And multicultural food.
I know how you are with the multicultural
We
food.
love the multicultural food.
The one thing they really should do for those events though is just have everyone like get one plate and walk around because there's a lot of plates every place you go.
Yeah.
Mr. Mena?
Yep, I actually attended the Novi Athletic Booster meeting last night. Probably been a while since I've actually attended. It could have been a year, so it's been a while. And it's always nice listening to our athletic director actually kind of give a report of what has been happening during fall season. But a couple takeaways I had, I don't know if you guys knew this, field hockey has been a non-MHSA sport now forever. That will become an MHSA sport starting in the 2025-2026 school year. In addition, the MHSA is adding a new sport, a spring sport starting in the 2025-2026 season, and that's boys volleyball. So, my understanding is that there is a lot of interest.
They'll be graduated.
I'm going to be graduated, but my friends, I like the people who started the club like about 2-3 years ago, are some like my really close buddies. So a lot of my friends play that sport, and so it makes me really happy to hear.
So that's going to be really interesting to actually get some gym usage in the spring because there's not a lot that happens. And then I also I want to mention that we're going to depending on kind of what happens this weekend in Division I, in any of the divisions, we will most likely be hosting a state semifinal game here in Novi as we have for the past 5-6 years. Yep. And then lastly, I got an invite from the athletic director over at Detroit Catholic Central, Aaron Babbitts. I want to thank him for inviting me to come up and kind of check out their game day operations and their press box and their video board. It was very impressive. I've got to share with them some of the things we do at Novi, as well as learn quite a bit as well, some of the cool things that they were doing there as well.
Remember, copy with pride.
That's right, and we will.
Any other board communications, Mrs. Burgoyne?
So first, I think most of us attended the meeting at Meadows about the planning long-term for our district. And just wanted to say I thought it was great. Hearing from Young Zhao, who's, what's his background like? He's an educational innovator. Is that an accurate way to?
He's a longtime researcher.
Longtime researcher, okay. So he had so many thought-provoking ideas. And I was taking notes like I always do and looking through them tonight. One of the things that kind of struck me was that in our society right now, we focus a lot on trying to have our students be really good at everything. And just this idea that maybe we don't all need to be an expert in every single thing we touch. And just looking at that from a lens of, how do we find what we're good at, what we love, what we're passionate about, what we want to do, and then really hone those skills because, if you're going to be an artist, your algebra is not going to be your main focus. Like we still need to meet our grad requirements and focus on those things too, but just looking at the differences in terms of, and we've talked about this as a board a bit as well, if you're going to be an engineer, more of like a technical writing course may be more important for what you want to learn than like learning historical literature or poetry or something like that, which also has relevance in other circumstances. So I just wanted to thank you for bringing him in, and he is going to be back December 2nd. I would encourage the community to attend because the questions he asked I found in a lot of ways to be things I had not ever really thought of, like for the idea of to someone to just say like, well, why do we need to do this? I was like, oh, I'm not sure why we do some of the things we do. And I generally consider myself to be the kind of person who tries to get to the why of different things. So I find it to be very valuable, and hopefully our community will as well. And then second, I'm not entirely sure how to broach this, but I feel like the national climate has been a challenge the last several months. With the election concluding, I am hopeful that things will calm down. But I did just want to say that I've heard from a number of students and families that they're concerned about how national things are going to affect their space in our community. And I just wanted to communicate that myself as a board member, and I believe it's the case of everyone at this table, that we are all committed to the belonging and safety of all of our students and families, and will continue to uphold those expectations and make sure that we are doing everything we can from here. And just wanted to say basically, like, to all of our students, we love you, we're happy you're here, and we will continue to support you in any way that we can. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Any other, Mrs. Roney?
On Veterans Day, Novi had a celebration at the Novi Civic Center. And I went, my husband's part of the Rotary, and we helped serve. And I was pleasantly surprised to see on the tables, on top of every placemat, was a little "Thank you, American Hero." It was from, I believe, our 4th graders at Deerfield, and they did these little things that every veteran, you know, it's like, "Dear veteran, I appreciate your bravery and courage so much. Thank you for serving our country and protecting our community. I wish you a happy Veterans Day." And then they signed their name. I just thought this was wonderful, and that our schools took part of this. I just thought it was great. It was really nice. Okay, and that's all I got to say.
Okay.
I also attended the educational, it was actually a facilities planning meeting, but it was so thought-provoking. I could sit here for hours and talk about it, and so I won't bore you all with that, but I've been pondering all the conversations that Young Zhao brought to the table. I was super impressed, like Dr. Carino said, with our student council students, our high school students, how they went through that project. And quite frankly, I think that they did a better job than we did at master planning. So I think we need to go back to our master planning meeting.
Yes.
And
Yes,
we
do.
need to revisit our conversations based on just watching the students and how they took the task at hand and opened up their mind a lot bigger than sometimes we adults do. So I thought that that was very interesting.
Yep. Okay, thank you. I will mention that the Novi Singers, they participate in a lot of these events. They participated in the Veterans Day. And,
I'm sorry, yes, they were there.
yeah, but they do wonderful work throughout the community, because they also participated earlier this year in a POW ceremony at the cemetery. But appreciate that. Last night I was at, Tuesday night. Get my nights mixed up. No, last night. Awkward pause.
Last night was awkward pause.
Last night was awkward pause. And if you haven't made it there, it's an interesting group, and it's a group that supports each other without judgment and without ridicule. They're all very supportive of each other, and it's a group of kids that really get along. They spend time doing introductions and getting to know each other. And they're from various backgrounds, and their mission is to be thought-provoking enough that we just take that awkward pause to think about something that they bring up. And they're all pieces that are written by students. Some have been written in the past, but there were 3 pieces that were written by students that are currently acting. And one of them, a piece of poetry, was, I don't know, it was nothing short of astounding. And I'm not going to call her name out, but she's a very good writer. She writes a lot, and She did a wonderful job. All the kids did wonderful there. And this was their 8th or 7th performance. They do it each hour during the day for different groups. But if you get a chance to go, just go once and you'll see. But it's interesting, and I think it's something that we need in the district, you know. But you know, I've had many conversations with Mr. Meinke about this. So it was a good time. Other than that, I think that's all I'm really gonna report. Ms.
If I
O'Donnell.
could piggyback on that, the next awkward pause is the freshman show, December 4th. Check it out, I concur.
So, I know I've seen Tom there and everything.
Is it? Yeah, so as somebody who's watched Awkward Pause like my entire high school career, as a freshman when I watched it, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really appreciate it. I was so confused as to like what exactly am I doing? And as I've matured throughout like Novi, it's nice to see that Novi has always had a place for somebody. If no matter who you are, no matter what you do, like what your interests are, like you said, various backgrounds, there's always something for everybody in Novi. And Awkward Pause is just an expression of that, and it's really cool to be able to see people make like just create things, and that's just amazing. I'd like to piggyback off what you said as well.
Thank you, Cameron.
Of course.
Okay, any other comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none? We don't have anything left.
Motion to adjourn?
Support.
Motion by Mr. Mena, supported by Mrs. Roney. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 7-0. Thank you very much, and good evening.
There's the gentleman,
On the way up.
and that's your super.